Good morning, all you cool cats and kittens. I'm Josh, the education assistant here at the Bean Life Science Museum, and welcome back to another one of our collections tours. Today, we are in our mammal collection. Because of the whole coronavirus thing, I'm doing this by myself, so I won't be able to move the camera around a whole lot. But I've brought out a lot of things to show you guys. And hopefully at the end I'll be able to go look at your questions and try to answer some of them before we sign off. So let's start talking a little bit about mammals. Now mammals are one of the 5 vertebrate classes. So vertebrates are animals that have vertebrae or a backbone. So vertebrate animals have a backbone. And there are 5 groups or classes of vertebrates. We have mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Today we're going to be talking about mammals. And there are a few characteristics that make mammals mammals. So a few of them are, one, they have mammary glands, or they produce milk to feed their young. And so that's one. They also typically have fur, so that is one of their characteristics. So the animals that you will see today have fur. And they also are endothermic. Endothermic means warm-blooded. So I'll say that word again, endothermic. Endothermic. That's the word that scientists like to use. It's a little bit better than warm-blooded. They also have 3 bones in their inner ear. That's one of the things that makes a mammal. They've got 3 bones in their inner ear to help them hear. So now when we're talking about mammals, there are somewhere around maybe 5,000 species of mammals that are described, right? And by described, I mean that there are 5,000 that we have named and classified. All right, so there may be a few more out there that we have yet to classify or discover, right? But we know of somewhere around 5,000. Half of that 5,000, of those 5,000 species of mammals, are rodents. So here I've got a tray. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but these are all deer mice, right? So these are rodents. So again, about half of all, somewhere between 40 and 50%, right? So close to half of all mammals are rodents. And about a quarter of all mammals are bats. So there are a lot of species of rodents and bats. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we've got going on here in the collection. So first, for any of you that saw our bird collection video last week, you'll remember that these are research mounts, right? So they're not meant for display. They're not taxidermied to be put on display for people to see. So they're really simple. They're usually laid out straight and flat. Maybe I can bring this a little bit closer so you guys can see it. Here we go, it's straight and flat. We'll often stuff it with things like cotton or polyester batting. We don't put fake eyes in there. We don't put fake teeth. Oftentimes we'll put a wire inside to help keep it stiff and to help keep things like the tail stiff so it doesn't break as easily. All right, so that is a research mount. And I've got a few of these that we can talk about. Okay, now, another thing with these research mounts is you'll notice they all have they all have tags. On these tags, that one's upside down. On these tags we have the species name, we have where it was collected, when it was collected, who collected it, right? As well as sometimes we'll have other information like the weight, so how heavy it was when it was collected, and it'll often have an identification number. Sometimes more than one identification number. So often the scientist who collected it will have their own personal identification number for their own collection, for their own records, and we may also have a number associated with the museum's collection. So there may be two different collection numbers there. Right? So for everything in here, we have that tag. That's important. If we don't have that tag, or if we don't have that important information, the specimen isn't very useful to us for science. We need that information in order for it to be really useful. Let's see. So when we look at mammal specimens, one of the most important pieces of the specimen is the skull. So often in the fossil record, one of the only surviving pieces of mammals that we find are the skulls and the jaws. Right? So those have become very, very important for mammal identification purposes, especially the jaws. The jaws and teeth tell us a lot about the animal, especially about their diets, right? But the size of the jaws, the size of the skulls also give us indications of how large overall the animal may have been. So the skulls are one of the most important pieces of information we have with our specimens. So it may be hard to see from where you guys are, but on these trays here, so these are drawers, so similar to our bird collection that you may have seen last week. We keep everything in drawers, and that helps us fit a lot of animals into a small space. As you can see, we can fit a lot of rodents even onto one drawer. But for every rodent skin that we have, right, so we have all these skins here. For every rodent skin that we have, we also have a vial here that has the skeleton, at least the skull, and oftentimes the whole skeleton. Here, I'm going to bring it closer. Hopefully you can see that okay. So each skin has its matching skeleton. And again, here in this vial we have another label with all that same information with a number that matches the skeleton to the skin. So we can match this specific skeleton to the specific skin over here. Okay, and oftentimes too, again, it may be difficult to see and there may be a little bit of a glare on this vial, but there sometimes we'll even write information right on the skull, such as the case here. Now, in order to keep the skeletons and to clean them and keep them intact, so these rodent skeletons, these mouse skeletons here, are really, really small. Same with these bat skeletons. They're very, very small with lots of tiny, delicate bones, which are very easy to break. So in order to clean them, we have here at the museum, not here in this building, it's actually in another building on campus, away from here, we have a colony of flesh-eating beetles. Pretty cool, right? We have flesh-eating beetles where we can put in the skeletons, right? And the beetles will clean them completely. They'll clean off all of the tissue off of the bones. So what's left are the perfect clean bones. And the beetles don't break the bones. So we often have fully intact skeletons. It's really cool. It's a really cool process. But again, we have not only the furs or the skins, but we have the skeletons and the bones as well. So, let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned a second ago why the skulls and the jaws are important for identification, right? So there's something in biology that we call, or there's a term that we refer to as form and function. So the structure or the form of an animal or an animal part, right, such as a skull or jaw, the form or structure will tell us what it's for, right? So for example, here we've got a bat, and these bats, they've got the structure of a wing, right? Their fingers are really long, and they have lots of skin. They have a big flap of skin stretched between their fingers, right? And they use that to fly. So the form of having the long fingers and the skin between them indicates the function of flying. Okay, so with things like skulls, oftentimes the teeth, the structure of the teeth, how many teeth there are, the shape of the teeth, the size of the teeth, those tell us what they use those jaws for. So, for example, I have behind me a few skulls. This skull is a grizzly bear skull. This is a grizzly bear skull. So let's look at the skull for a second. You can see the teeth. Try to hold it close. You can see those front teeth. You can see the teeth on the side as well. Right? So we can see a couple things about the teeth. Let me bring it even closer. Point things out. So here we can see they have these really large canine teeth. Okay, those big canine teeth. They have these teeth here in the front and these teeth here on the side. So let's think about this for a second. What do you think those teeth are made for doing? Do they look different than your teeth? And how are they different than your teeth? So think about that for a second. How are those teeth different from yours? And what do you think those teeth are for? So, like us, grizzly bears are omnivorous. I'll say that again, omnivorous. That means they eat both plants and animals, right? They eat both plants and meat. So their teeth are built, so they've got these long canine teeth, right? Those they use for killing animals to eat, right? And maybe helping to rip apart the flesh to help them eat it, right? They can also be used for defense, so to help them fight other bears, right? Or other animals that are trying to harm them, right? And they have these teeth here on the sides. Some of them are kind of sharp, almost like a razor shaped or a knife shape to help them cut through meat. And they do have a couple of flat teeth in the back. They have a couple of flat teeth in the back to help them chew. Right? These teeth here in the front help them cut things off of plants. Right? Help them cut plant material so that they can eat it. Right? So those teeth can tell us a lot about the bear's diet. Right? But let's look at other parts of the skull. Let's look at the skull shape overall. What do you notice? And what do you think it does to help the bear? Or how does the bear use it? So we'll think about that for a little while longer. Okay, let me show you a couple of other things here. So, So these, like I mentioned, this drawer here are these are all deer mice, Paramiscus maniculatus. They're all deer mice. They're very common here in Utah, and they're common in a lot of places, in much of North America, I believe. All right. Those are deer mice. Not typically the kind of mouse that you'll find inside of your house, but one that'll be outside in all the shrubs and things like that. Okay, here we have some bats. And these, looks like most of these are also collected in Utah. These ones here are collected near the Strawberry River. Okay, and I don't know the common name for these bats. But they are Utah bats. We have, I believe we have something like 18 species of bat here in Utah, which is really cool. It's a lot of different kinds of bats. And most of you probably never even see them. All right, now, let me move our deer mice. And I'll show you something else. Let me bring this one over. This is a heavier drawer. All right. You see these okay? Any guesses as to what these are? Maybe you've seen these before. These are also from Utah, where this species can be found in Utah. Let's see where these individuals are from. This one's from near Walsburg. Again, near Walsburg. Looks like maybe all of them are from near Walsburg, so that's kind of up Provo Canyon. These are black-tailed jackrabbits, Lepus californicus. And you can see we've got the skins here. Again, they're just flat. We don't put in the fake eyes. We have the hind feet out behind. The front feet are laid flat underneath the head. And you can see they have this stick in them to help keep them stiff and make them easier to handle so they don't break. They're a little bit too big for just a little wire like we had with the mice. So we've got that stick in there. And you can see in these boxes here, well, maybe you can't see them. Let me bring them back here. So we have these boxes in the drawer with these. These boxes contain, any guesses? These boxes contain the skeletons. So here's the skull, but we also have vertebrae. So this is the backbone. It still has one of the ribs attached. All right, so in here we have the skeletons. Because again, that's an important, the skeletons are really important for us because they can tell us a lot about the individual rabbits. So another reason why the skeletons and skulls are important is they help us with size. So you can see these skins here, they all look to be about the same size. Because of the way that they're flattened, and because we don't have the bones in them, it's hard to take measurements with just the skins, right? It's hard to take accurate measurements of how large or how small these hairs may have been when they were alive. But the bones will tell us that information, right? Because the bones are hard, they don't flex, they don't stretch, and so we can get good precise measurements with those bones. So here's black-tailed jackrabbits. All right, let me move this drawer here. Let me bring another one out. This is a really cool one. Alright, so here we have some more bats. Let me bring our other bat drawer over here to show you comparisons. All right, so again, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of species of bats in the world. And we have some that are very small. These bats here are not even the smallest bats, right? This is actually a pretty good sized bat. But you can see these ones here are even larger. So these are some of the largest bats in the world, not found in Utah. These are flying foxes, typically found in the South Pacific, in Indonesia, right, Southeast Asia. This one specifically is from Kuala Lumpur. You can see we've got them in several positions. So with the bats, you see the bats are laid out a little differently than the mice were. And we have these wings, on some of them we have the wings kind of out to the side a little bit. Right? But with some others, we have them tucked in. Right? That just helps us get a couple of different perspectives. Because once they're stored like this, they become really stiff. And because those bones and that skin is so delicate, we don't want to pull the wings out and put them back all the time to study them, because that could really damage them. So you can see we also have a couple of splayed out wings from one of these bats here, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. All right, so let me move these guys off to the side. And we'll show you a couple of other cool parts of it. So our mammal collection is curated currently by the museum's director, Dr. Duke Rogers, who is continually adding things to the collection. So Dr. Rogers does a lot of work with rodents and bats. So we are frequently adding rodents and bats to our collections. But we have specimens in here from all over the world. We have somewhere, I believe, around 40,000 specimens here in our mammal collection. So we have about 40,000 specimens. And that number is continually increasing because this is one of our active collections where we have scientists actively adding things to it, right? Which is really neat. So, I showed you guys a minute ago this grizzly bear skull, Ursus arctos. Okay, this skull came from a bear in Alaska. Okay, and I have another bear skull here. This is a polar bear skull, Ursus maritimus. This polar bear actually was one that had lived and then passed away at the Hogle Zoo. I'll show it. On the grizzly bear skull, the jaw is wired to the skull, but this one there, it's kind of loose. So this was a polar bear that had died at the Hogle Zoo, and the Hogle Zoo donated it to us for our collection. Okay, so you may notice a couple of differences between these skulls here. Okay, the size is one difference, but that's not a really great comparison because they may be different ages. So this one was likely an older bear. This one could be a younger one, and so smaller. So it's not, we can't really accurately say, wow, polar bears are so much bigger than grizzly bears just based on these two skulls. And again, that's why it's important to have so many specimens. And that's one reason why we have so many of even the same species, right? You saw with our bats or with our deer mice, right? We have a lot of specimens of the same species, which tells us, which can give us a range of how big they are, right? We could see a range of things like the tail length or ear length or a range of sizes in the skulls, or range of weights. So that gives us a range of how big or how small that species can be, right? So in order to really accurately compare the sizes of grizzly bears and polar bears, we would need a lot of different specimens of those same species, right? So that we can see on average how big they are, and then get an idea, right? Polar bears do average a little bit bigger than grizzly bears, right? But you'll notice that these are shaped a little differently. All right, so I'll give you a second to look at their shapes. Think about how they're different. So we're not looking at the size, so ignore the size difference, but look at the shape difference. The shape difference. Give you another view. Or look at how they're similar. Alright? So both of these bears are in the same genus. Right? They're both Ursus genus. Right? They're bears. They're just different species. So they're closely related. Right? So there are a lot of things that are similar, but and then how are they also different? So one thing you'll notice about this polar bear that you don't see on this particular grizzly bear skull, probably because this is a younger one, is you can see here on the back of the skull, here we have this tall ridge, as well as on the very back here, kind of flares up. Right, we have these ridges on the back and one right down the middle. This ridge down the middle is called a sagittal crest. We refer to that as a sagittal crest. And this ridge here serves as a place for jaw muscles to attach. Right, so the larger the sagittal crest on an animal, or on a mammal in particular, the larger the sagittal crest, the more jaw muscles it has, and therefore the stronger its bite. You can also see here on the side, right, we have this bone here that kind of sticks out. You see that? And you can see it on both of these. Right, they have these bones that stick out. So here are the eye sockets. Right, so behind those eye sockets, that bone sticking out, inside of the bone here in that space is where the jaw muscles go. So you can see the jaw here. Here on the jaw, this is where these muscles attach to. These kind of plates there. And you can see when I put, when I put this skull back together, let's see, how did I go? Okay, there we go. When I put the skull back together, these plates on the lower jaw come up right in the middle of this big hole here. So that's where the jaw muscles go, right? The jaw muscles kind of come inside of this bone and attach to the jaw, and then come up and attach to this upper part of the skull. Right, so the larger not only the sagittal crest, but the larger this big bone out here is, right, the more space there is inside of there, the more jaw muscles and the stronger their bite. Pretty cool. All right. I've got a couple of other skulls here to show you. So you notice these ones are in boxes. If I can get these boxes open, I'll show them to you. Okay, here, I'll give give you a second, and you guys can kind of guess maybe what kind of animals these are here. Okay. I'm not very good at putting those back together. All right. I'll let you maybe guess what they are. Just take a second. I'll turn them. You can see they're really similar in shape and structure. Put them out here so you can see them a little better. They're similar in shape and structure, though they are size. There's a size difference. And there's a significant size difference between these two. They're different species, and even in different genera. So this larger one here, on my right, is a leopard. This is a leopard skull. The smaller one here is a bobcat. So the leopard, Panthera pardus, and the bobcat, Lynx rufus. Those are their scientific names. So they're both cats. So you can see that they have a really similar structure to them. This one almost just looks like a mini version of this, right? You can see though on the leopard, there is a much larger sagittal crest. I'll show that up a little bit closer. You can see the larger sagittal crest than on the bobcat, though the bobcat does have one, right? You can see a size difference in their canine teeth. Okay. You can see this leopard here has some really long canine teeth. And I'm having a hard time with that bobcat skull. Now let me bring the bobcat jaw a little closer, since we've got it. I want you to look at the teeth on this lower jaw. So you see they don't really have a lot of teeth compared to us, right? But they've got those large teeth down here, and these back ones are all pretty sharp, kind of scissor or knife-like. These cats are both strictly carnivorous. Carnivorous meaning that they eat only meat. And so those teeth, so these larger ones there, help them kill their food, right? And then these teeth in the back help them cut that meat up into smaller pieces to swallow. Right? They don't chew their food in the same way that we do. We chew ours all completely into mush before swallowing it. They're not chewing it quite as much, but they use their teeth to cut it. They use those teeth to cut the meat so that they can then eat it. All right, let's put them away. And I'll show you a couple of other things here. Here are a couple of what we refer to as articulated skeletons. So they've been kind of pieced back together the way they would be, the way they're all connected. This one here is a house cat. You see the skull, again, looks really similar to those two other cat skulls that we saw. Down here, the smaller one, this is a kangaroo rat. Specifically a chisel-toothed kangaroo rat. It's pretty cool. Alright, I think that is all that I wanted to show you guys today. I'm going to come over around behind the camera and see if there are any questions or comments that you'd like me to answer. So give me 1 second and let's get to those. Okay, we have Jessica Aston says her kids think the Beatles are cool, and I have to completely agree. The Beatles are really cool. And Sarah Robinson says rabbits. Rabbits are pretty cool as well. Lexi Chamberlain asks, would a polar bear in captivity grow to be as big as a polar bear in the wild? So that is a great question. I don't completely know the answer to that question. My guess is yes. So the size is going to will often depend on their diet, right? So what they're eating, as well as how well they're taken care of, right? And how old they get to be. So in a zoo or in captivity, oftentimes animals will be even older, will get even older in captivity than they might in the wild. Because they're well taken care of, they don't have as many things to stress them out. They don't have to work as hard, right? So their bodies have a much easier life, which lets them live usually a little longer. So living longer could mean that they maybe get bigger. So I don't know. My guess is that they could possibly be just as big, if not maybe even bigger in captivity than they would in the wild. But it also depends maybe where those polar bears came from. For example, the ones in captivity were probably bred in captivity, so there's maybe not as much genetic diversity. Maybe their parents weren't as big, so maybe there are some individuals out in the wild, just because of their genetics, they just can get bigger. So that's a question that would be really hard to answer, so I'm not sure. But it is a good question and something good to think about. All right, last look for questions. Well, all right, everybody, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully, we'll be able to do another collections visit here in the future and see one of our other research collections. But again, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys later.